The Metropolitan Synodal Assembly of Dipolog, Ozamis, Pagadian, Iligan, and Marawi, or DUPIM, was a joy-filled moment and a spirit-filled experience. The assembly discerned how the Holy Spirit has been working in the different stories of the synodal journey in an atmosphere of prayerful listening. True to the Filipino culture, the delegates extended the sharing of the synodal stories when they also shared their local delicacies in a table fellowship. Despite the variability of the methods undertaken by the different dioceses in their sectoral consultations, the delegates found themselves relating to the shared experiences and observations. They were seen nodding their heads in affirmation of the findings as they relate to some unique and common experiences shared by each diocese. As the day ended, the delegates left not only with the gifts and pasalubong from other delegates, but also going home with a DUPIM rekindled spirit that reminded everyone that they are one in this journey. The assembly was not simply an exchange of ideas. Rather, it was essentially a moment of encounter with Jesus in the lived experiences of the sectoral participants. It was a sharing of life, a synodal experience. However, like the two disciples who walked together on the road to Emmaus, bringing with them the stories of their Jerusalem, their hopelessness, discouragements, and frustrations, the local church in DUPIM has to traverse rough roads due to the challenges that the church has been facing. Nevertheless, the journey continues to move forward, finding ways to address and overcome these challenges. With the guidance of the Holy Spirit, this synodal journey equips the church with the experience to go forward and face the upcoming challenges firmly and persistently in communion, participation, and mission.
Based on the 5 diocesan syntheses, the Metropolitan Assembly extracted 6 common themes. They are categorized as follows. First, reaching out to the peripheries. Second, the clergy. Third, the family and youth. Fourth, church governance and financial management. Fifth, creation. And sixth, catechism. On the first theme, namely reaching out to the peripheries, there are 6 points of observation. First, go into the margins. The church's pastoral ministry in some places is concentrated only in the parish, hence taking minimal care of the small chapels in the barrios. Corollary to this, many Catholics are inspired upon seeing their priest descending into the margins, especially the bishop's frequent chapel and parish visitation to celebrate the Holy Eucharist and the sacrament of confirmation, and even to facilitate seminars and lectures. On the second point, to seek out the inactive church members, the increasing numbers of Catholics in the church due to the increase in annual baptism is worth celebrating, but this also poses the problem of shepherding. Pastoral strategies, services, and programs are concentrated only on the active members of the church, thus neglecting its inactive members. The third point, which arises from the consultation, is to create concrete pastoral program for the poor. During the synodal consultation, the poor in the society are grateful that the church is determined to hear their voice. However, while in the synodal process, the coming closer of the church to them boasts their dignity, they also lament that the church has limited pastoral programs for them. There is indeed a need for the church to shift its mentality from the temptation to always receive to the desire to give. The fourth point, which rises up from the consultation, is the need to design pastoral strategy to warrant active participation of men. The dynamism of the Church's synodal journey is fueled by women's active presence and involvement in the church's mission. However, while women's active presence in the church is a source of jubilation, the lukewarm, if not the absence of participation of the part of men, is alarming. Only few men are actively involved in the church, noting that the church is not their priority. The church needs to reach out to one of the sectors that are left out within the borders, the men. The fifth point under the same theme is to welcome the LGBTQ communities in the church. The church's attitude to the members of that community is not condemning, but not also allowing. In fact, there are already a few members who are already serving in the church. But despite this, there is still a subtle experience of discrimination. This is due to different factors. One of them is cultural or lack of education. And the last point under this same theme is to allow the politicians to serve the church. When the church puts an imaginary boundary between politics and religion, the participation of those who are in the political world in the church's ministries becomes complicated. The church's stand is understandable. It does not allow politicians to use the church to gain votes during elections. But throwing away people the moment they join the political race is a question of how welcoming the church is. If the church wants to help the politicians in the so-called moral recovery in politics, then the church must not leave them. We now go into the second theme, namely the clergy, and there are also 6 points under this theme. First is to form the humanity of the ordained ministers. Several priests who have vices are perceived to have a bad influence, especially in the youth. Besides, some priests who show unbecoming behaviors, especially while celebrating the Mass, have turned off, hurt, and offended the faithful. Such were pointed out as barriers to having a proper disposition to voluntarily involve oneself in church's ministries and services. Truly, if the human formation on the part of the clergy is not well addressed, in the end, the faithful will suffer the most. The second point under this theme, and that is to live a simple lifestyle. For the members of the church, the lifestyle of their priest could either inspire or turn them off. Priests who are too secular are offensive to the people, especially priests who are engaged in business, those who own vast properties, and those who use parish funds for their personal needs. Many faithful who are offended and are hurt upon seeing their priest compromising their ministry in favor of their luxurious lifestyle eventually depart from the church. Indeed, the ordained ministers need to have a lifestyle sensitive to the plight of the poor. Otherwise, a rich lifestyle of the clergy would only create an impression that finances in the parish are there to support their expensive lifestyle. Now, on the third point under this theme, and that is to create healthy ministerial brotherhood. When conflict and misunderstanding among the clergy result in character assassination of their brother priest, then it causes confusion and divisions among their flock. As a result, many parishioners would no longer come to the church and pray. Now, on the fourth point under the same theme, to address clerical sexual misconduct. Talks about some priests having girlfriends, boyfriends, and even concubines have devastated the credibility of the clergy. Some priests who have sired a child or children wounded the reputation of the church. As a result, priests suffer the judgment of stereotyping, believing that all priests are playboys or gays. In fact, husbands are also suspicious of priests. Hence, they prohibit their wives from actively joining in church's activities. Unable to contain the shame, some Catholics had already left the church. Some still stay, but they are not proud to profess in public that they are Catholics. The fifth point under this theme is to improve the competence of the clergy. There are some priests who, after years in their priestly ministry, have already given up their desire and passion for updating their theology and pastoral strategy. As a result, people suffer from mediocrity in pastoral ministry. This led to long and unsubstantial homilies, weak catechetical instructions, prioritizing fundraising strategy over the pastoral ministry. If the church is journeying in a changing world, then the competence of the priest also matters. We now go to the last point of this theme, and that is to praise the faithful priests. Despite the negative impressions that the community has on some priests, they do not discredit those priests who have faithfully lived their priestly calling. They admired those who religiously perform their pastoral ministries beyond office hours by extending their helping hands even outside their comfort zones. They trusted more those who are associated with the poor and not with the rich and the famous, and even appreciated those who celebrated the Mass solemnly and administered the sacraments without hurry. People look at them as inspirations and models of Christ's way of shepherding. Truly, when the priests are indeed priests in the real sense of their ordination, the people of God are inspired to walk on the path toward unity. We now go to the third theme of the synthesis, namely the family and youth. There are 3 points of observation. First, to accompany the family in all its multifaceted reality. Family life ministry in the church should not end after the giving of pre-cana seminars and the rite of matrimony. Only after the celebration of marriage inside the church does the challenge of family life begin. But sadly, many families are wounded by separation, such as the experience of the families left by overseas Filipino workers. Many would ask, where is the church? The church must address not only the family's faith formation, but also its multifaceted realities. Therefore, there is a need to widen the substance of family ministry, which essentially includes catechesis, family counseling, livelihood program, financial literacy, marriage enhancement, and among others. In other words, the church must accompany every Catholic family, including the civilly married and live-in families, in the joys and pains of their family life. We now go to the second point of the theme, namely, to help heal the wounded youth. If family life is neglected, the youth is the most affected sector in society. Corollary to the challenging family life, many young people have experienced depression due to worsening family relationships or broken families. Hence, a phenomenon of suicide cases among the youth. The Church, on her part, must not take simply the role of a superior moral judge. She must move out and seek her depressed and anxious, vulnerable young flock. In this way, the Church's healing presence amid the suffering family and the youth is really felt. We now go to the last point of the theme, namely, to revitalize the missionary passion of the youth. The Church needs to rekindle the missionary zeal of the youth. The large vacuum in the Church's pastoral ministry due to the aging of the Church's personnel must be addressed by igniting the pastoral enthusiasm of the younger generation. Youth in the dioceses are no longer the future of the Church. They are the present of the Church. Indeed, the contribution of the youth in the Church's ministry is unquestionable, but one group of young people needs care and attention. We now go to the fourth theme of the synthesis, namely the church governance and financial management. And one point came out, that is, to top lay leaders to help priests in church governance and financial management. The observed limitations on the administrative as well as the executive knowledge and capabilities of priests in matters of governance resulted in a loud call to expand the role of the laity to enable the parish priest to be more competent and efficient in running the pastoral plans and programs of the parish. There is an expressed desire for greater inclusivity, consultation in the decision-making process, and accountability on the part of parish priests. One specific area in church governance that was also highlighted to the fore was financial management in the parishes. Complicating this matter is the differing lifestyle and attitudes of priests. Transparency and accountability of resources and finances are recommended. To avoid confusion and diverse financial administration, it would do well for a diocese to standardize its financial management policies to serve as a guide for the parish finance councils. Transparency and complete openness are fundamental principles of good governance. By being open and transparent, a church will experience the freedom to talk about money, encourage giving, and reduce the opportunity to talk about financial mismanagement and malfeasance. Transparency can truly be liberating. We now go to the fifth theme of the synthesis, namely creation, and the call for ecological conversion is stressed out. Propelled by the fruit of her worship, the Church goes out and fights for the protection of human and ecological rights. The social action ministry in the dioceses serves as the active hands of the Church in its care for the victims of human rights, which in most cases are the poor. The Church also is vocal in her condemnation of the destruction of the environment by rallying against the operation of the mining industry. However, while the Church was active in protecting the environment, the call for ecological conversion remains challenging. And now, on the last theme of the synthesis, namely the catechism, there is only one point being highlighted: to intensify catechetical ministry. Many Catholics struggle to understand the catechism of the Church, which is perceived to be too heady and theological. Truly, there is a need to understand the doctrines of the Church, but such a catechetical instruction is not friendly to the ordinary Church members, the less educated. As a result, they merely memorize Church doctrines but cannot explain them, or they become practicing Catholics without understanding what they have practiced. Adding to this pain also is the lament of not a few catechists that a bigger budget in the parish is allocated for infrastructure, while the catechetical ministry has minimal budget allocation at all. Due to the lack of vibrant catechetical programs, many Catholics are attracted to Protestant way of indoctrination, which is more straightforward and Bible-based. In the end, the Church is wounded upon seeing her members joining other Christian churches. Discerning the shared stories of the synodal experiences, the Metropolitan Pre-Synodal Assembly identified the lights that the Church has experienced, such as her willingness to listen to her fold, her reaching out to the peripheries, and her call to ecological conversion. However, the Metropolitan Church of Dupim also recognized the shadows of her experiences, such as clericalism, the rigid requirements on the accessibility of the sacraments, the minimal care for the youth, and the mediocrity of her attention. for the poor and the marginalized. The delegates of DUPIM Pre-Synodal Assembly have also seen new perspectives on how to journey in a synodal spirit which lead them to common aspirations, such as to intensify or even prioritize the Church's accompaniment for the abandoned sectors, to provide new structures for a welcoming and listening church, to practice the call of the new evangelization, and the renewal of the Church's inner structures and life through dialogue. The DUPIM Church aspires for a community of peace and harmony, reflected in her cultural greetings, Panagdait, Cebuan term for peace and goodwill. But Panagdait is not just an absence of war. It is also the eradication of poverty. Panagdait is when the Church stops talking for a while so she can listen well to the cry of suffering of her folk. Panagdait is when we see Jesus smiling because the least, the last, and the lost have finally occupied the best seats in the Church. Panagdait is when we live the synodal spirit.